Who are we? Why are we here? Why do we suffer? Humans have grappled with these questions since time immemorial. Philosophers, spiritual leaders, scientists, and artists have all weighed in on them. And in Western philosophy, the best answer to the question of who we are is that thinking is the defining characteristic of humanity. There's no more concise example of this than philosopher René Descartes and his famous statement, cogito ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am. 64,000 is the median number of words per book. Average person reads about 200 words per minute. Simple math will tell us that is one book in 320 minutes. To accomplish this in 7 days, numbers say you would have to read for 45 minutes a day. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button, like, comment, and share. Enjoy. Welcome to the Book of the Week series. Every week as I read another amazing title, I share it with the world. My name is Igor S.F. Walker. Today we look at No Self, No Problem. How Neuropsychology is Catching Up to Buddhism by Chris Neubauer, PhD. So how about you slow down and relax? Reduce all that noise for just a bit. Make that choice and decide to listen. In this video, we look at the brain, its left and right side, and its effects on human cognition and behavior. We explore the idea that the left brain is an interpreter or story maker, and truly not the home of the self most people believe it is. We look at the right brain and how it works, which includes things such as finding meaning, our ability to see and understand big picture ideas, expressing creativity, experiencing emotions, and spatial processing. We look for the self to discover it actually isn't there. So stick around till the end. I will share with you some tools that will help you tremendously in this game of life. Discover a way to find out what actually motivates you, what innate human need is driving all of your decisions and your behavior. I will share some tools to improve your self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. This reverence for thinking is actually in stark contrast to the tenets of Eastern philosophy found in traditions such as Buddhism, Taoism, and certain schools of Hinduism. These traditions at best advocate a distrust of the thinking mind, and often go further to claim that the thinking mind is actually part of the problem rather than the solution. Zen Buddhism offers us a saying, no thought, no problem. Success story of neuroscience has been in mapping the brain. We can point to the language center, face processing center, and the center for understanding the emotions of others. Practically every function of the mind has been mapped to the brain, with one important exception, the self. Perhaps the reason we cannot find the self in the brain is because it isn't there. Mistaking the voice in our head for a thing and labeling it me brings us into conflict with the neuropsychological evidence that shows there is no such a thing. This mistake, this illusory sense of self, is the primary cause of our mental suffering. What's more, I contend that it actually blocks access to the eternal, expansive thread of universal consciousness that is always available to us. Mental suffering is different from physical pain. Pain occurs in the body and is a physical reaction, like when you stub your toe or you break an arm. The suffering I speak of occurs in the mind only and describes things such as worry, anger, anxiety, regret, jealousy, shame. and a host of other negative mental states. Taoist philosopher and author Wei Wu Wei writes, "Why are you unhappy? Because 99.9% of everything you think and everything you do is actually for yourself, and there isn't one." Pattern recognition, language, map making, and categorization are all located in the left brain, and the evidence suggests that it is exactly these types of functions that collectively lead to the sensation of a self and a strong belief in its absolute truth. Studies in neuroscience and psychology strongly suggest what Eastern philosophies have been saying for millennia, namely that this idea of me, or the self, that most of us take for granted, doesn't exist in the way we think it does. Now, this may be a new idea for you, and before we begin, I do want to make clear that I'm not simply trying to convince you that the ego is an illusion by heaping mountains of research on you. Rather, I want to guide you to new experiences and open pathways to using different parts of the brain so that you can determine for yourself whether all of this is true or not. Guide your consciousness to a different way of looking at your experiences, and in so doing, allow you to go beyond the thoughts of the left brain. I believe this can greatly reduce your mental suffering, as it has mine. To begin, the most interesting aspect of the brain is also one of the most obvious. The brain has two mirror halves, connected by a large set of fibers called the corpus callosum. In the 60s, in research undertaken to mitigate severe epilepsy, these 800 million nerve fibers were actually severed. The central thesis being that seizure activity crossed from one side of the brain to the other over the corpus callosum, increasing the severity of seizures. Dr. Roger Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga believe that by cutting this bridge between the two sides of the brain, seizures would be easier to control. And they were correct. And Sperry would win a Nobel Prize in 1981 for this work. While each side of the brain specializes in certain types of tasks, both sides are usually in continuous communication. Now, when this communication was disrupted, however, it became possible to study the job of each side of the brain in isolation. It is also important to know that the body is cross-wired. That is, all the input and output from the right half of the body crosses over and is processed by the left brain, and vice versa. The crossover is also true for vision, so that the left half of what we see goes to the right side of the brain, and vice versa. Gazzaniga determined that the left side of the brain created explanations and reasons to help make sense of what was going on. The left brain acted as an interpreter for reality. Furthermore, Gazzaniga found that this interpreter was often completely and totally wrong. Now, this finding should have rocked the world, but most people haven't even heard of it. Ramachandran found that the left brain's role is one of beliefs and interpretations, and that it had little regard for reality in making up its interpretations. The truth is that your left brain has been interpreting for you your whole life. And if you are like most people, you have actually never understood the full implications of this. For example, in another classic study, people who think, perceive, and behave in ways considered normal were given a choice of a number of similar items and were then asked which they liked the best. Most people are unaware that we actually have a right side preference. That is, if you have a number of similar items in front of you, you will have a tendency to prefer the thing on the right. In the study, the researchers notice this tendency. However, when asked, why do you like that item? No one said it was because of a preference for where it was placed. Again, the left brain created a fiction, but a plausible theory. And the subjects would say things like, I just like the color, or I just like the texture of that. Misattributed arousal is the idea that when our nervous system is stimulated or excited, when our blood pressure goes up and our heart beats faster, the left brain interpreter will make up a story about the origin of this arousal, and often this story is completely wrong. Arousal and passion, among other intense emotions, can quickly destroy our ability to reason, leaving our left brain interpreter free to make up a story that it actually believes is truly a solid fit. Now, all these studies strongly suggest that we live our lives under the direction of the interpreter. And for most of us, the mind is the master and we're not even aware of it. We may become angry, offended, sexually aroused, happy, or fearful, and we do not question the authenticity of these thoughts and these experiences. While it is clear that these experiences are happening to us, we somehow retain the idea that we are still in charge of it all. We have already seen that this I can be wrong about so many things in the outside world. So is it possible then that the I is even wrong about the interpretation of itself? This is what Gazzaniga is getting at when he talks about our fictional self. Even though the left brain interpreter is always on and cannot be turned off, once it is recognized, or that is to say, once we do become aware of its constant interpretation, a new awareness of ourselves and of the world begins. Instead of being so identified with the me in our heads, we find ourselves noticing things like, oh, that's my left brain interpreter telling stories. When the stories it creates do not evoke a strong mental or emotional reaction, our suffering lessens as a result. Because the left brain looks outward and only focuses on objects, categorizing them, and then labels them. Is it possible that it also looks inward and then does the same thing? In other words, does the left brain see thought happening in the brain and then continuously create a thing out of the process of thinking, which it then labels me? Is the sense of self related to seeing patterns in randomness? Is it possible that the self we invest so much in is nothing more than a story to help explain our behaviors, the myriad events that do go on in our lives, and our experiences in the world? Given the language is controlled by the left brain, then it is no coincidence that it is the interpreter's main form of expression. This is most noticeable when we communicate with others. But the interpreter also talks to itself in the form of thoughts. Now, this internal dialogue is happening continuously for almost everyone on the planet, and it plays a central role in the creation of this mirage that we call the self. Language can obviously be extremely helpful in communicating with others, but the left brain also becomes so dependent on language that it mistakes the map of reality for reality itself, confusing the menu with the actual food. Our association of our true self with the constant voice in our head is an instance of mistaking the map, the voice, for the territory, who we really are. This error is one of the biggest reasons the illusion of self is so difficult to see. In what is likely the most studied experiment in the history of psychology, the Schrupp effect demonstrates how the left brain takes language literally and then mistakes the symbol for the thing itself. Do you use the tool, or does the tool use you? In my opinion, when you mistake the voice in your head for who you really are, the tool is using you. I is simply a useful categorical fiction expressed through language, believing wholeheartedly in the fiction of self. In effect, making the left brain interpreter the master instead of the servant has unintended consequences, suffering being one of them. The conundrum of the left brain: there's a limit to its understanding through categorizing and interpreting. And although we can hit that limit quickly and easily, many people, including some of the best-known psychologists and Western philosophers, disregard this fact and put their stock in the power of thinking. Categories are created by taking something continuous and then drawing the proverbial line in the sand to separate one into two. The placement of this line requires a judgment. Without judgment, categories could not exist. In fact, one could go so far as to say that the next closest word to interpreter would be judge, but without the moral aspect of judgment. To interpret is to judge things, and there's no way around it. Exactly where along the continuum of temperature does cold become hot? When do you get offended? When does good become evil? When does something becomes a catastrophe, a failure? When does being poor become being rich? When does happiness become sadness? Where do you draw the line for any and all of these? Now, recognizing this has immense practical benefits. Simply becoming aware of the interpreter and the endless categories it creates through judgment frees you from being tied to the inevitability of these judgments. That is to say, when you become conscious of the interpreter, you are free to choose to no longer take its interpretations so seriously. In other words, when you do realize that everyone's brain is constantly interpreting in ways that are subjective and often inaccurate or completely incorrect, you might find yourself able to grasp this as just my opinion or the way I see it, rather than this is the way it is. You begin to see your judgments as simply different line in the sand than others. The left brain interpreter also creates and sustains a collections of categorical thoughts based on judgments and then groups them together as likes and dislikes, ideas of right and wrong, and mental models of how things are supposed to be. We collectively call these judgments our belief system. If everyone believes something different, then we cannot all be right. What are the odds that you alone have the right beliefs and everyone else is wrong? What is the major source of conflict between people? Why do we fight each other? Turn on any news channel and you can confirm the intense suffering that occurs due to opposing belief systems. People die and kill for beliefs all the time, but not just any beliefs, only the ones they believe in, and without recognizing that they are only beliefs. Right and wrong are the sickness of the mind. Points to this dilemma precisely as right and wrong are only beliefs. And they become a sickness when we take them so seriously that they become the way things are. The power of a paradox. It often trips up the interpreter. And for this reason, paradox is a turnoff to those deeply possessed or controlled by the left brain. Paradox is also more attractive to those less identified with the interpreter. Example: the next sentence is true, the previous sentence is false. Paradox. Identity is merely a pattern of events in time and space. Change the pattern, and you have changed the person. By seeing patterns that are not there, the mind creates stories that aren't true. And as we have previously discussed, this can lead to unnecessary suffering, anxiety, and depression. From a neuropsychological perspective, we could say that all of these defenses are caused by the left brain's mechanism readjusting to unexpected pattern changes. From a Buddhist perspective, we could say that the self is recreating itself in the response to the threat of dissolution of self. In my view, they're one and the same. To be clear, saying the self is an illusion doesn't mean that it doesn't exist at all, but rather that it's akin to a mirage in the middle of the desert. The vision of the oasis is real, but the oasis itself isn't there. It isn't real. The left brain has created this illusion of self by noticing a pattern of categorical differences between you and others, and then combining those observations with memory, preferences, and the perspective of the pilot, who seems to be steering the ship of the brain and the body. Our definition of self depends in part on our difference from others. There is no me without the not me. You want to be smarter, more attractive, more, better. And all of these ideas are problems. Now, the tragedy here is that we never realize that none of these conditions will ever be met completely to the satisfaction of the self, because the self must continue to think in order to stay in existence, and therefore will always change the measuring stick, always adding a new better to then fall short of. One more caveat. You might be feeling guilty or even beating yourself up in this moment for not recognizing that the interpreter is a transparent image. Now, this will not help in overcoming suffering one bit, since the process of self-flagellation is exactly how the interpreter continues to create itself. Another way to think of the fictional self or ego is that its addiction to interpreting works like a drug. Every day it needs to get it fixed. And it does that in a variety of ways. Getting its fix, telling a story about what it perceives, comparing and categorizing itself against others, judging things as right or wrong. and it uses all of these processes to define you as yourself. In many ways, the right brain is the yin to the yang of the left brain. For instance, in the same way that the left brain is categorical, the right brain takes the more global approach to what it perceives. Rather than dividing things into categories and making judgments that actually separate the world, the right brain gives attention to the whole scene. And it processes the world as continuum, whereas the attention of the left brain is focused and narrow. The right brain is broad, vigilant, and in attends to the big picture. Left brain focuses on the local elements. The right brain processes the global form that the elements create. The left brain is sequential, separating time into before that or after that, while the right brain is focused on the immediacy of the present moment. Another way to summarize the difference between the left and right brain is that the left brain is the language center and the right brain is the spatial center. The abstract stories themselves are not the problem, but becoming lost in them becomes the problem. Our suffering comes from getting swept up in these stories and forgetting that they are not themselves reality. In this way, the story is always an illusion. It only exists in the mind. And only when we are in the process of telling it in words or thoughts, perhaps you can see that this is true not only of the story, but also of the storyteller, the self, which is another very convincing illusion, and it exists only when someone is talking about it. A. Martin Luther King Jr., winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, gave a speech about civil rights at the Lincoln Memorial. Or B. Apple Purple Bench. 7 whales in Texas flew south. Oven rust runs faster when it slides on 27 roads. Which one can you repeat back real quick? A or B? Write it in the comments. A or B? In the 1970s, psychology introduced a theory called levels of processing, but it could be very well called levels of meaning. The theory was very simple. If you process the meaning, you will remember it. But if you process only the surface features by just reading it to yourself or looking at the words themselves, it will be forgotten. So, which one was it? A or B? Write it in the comments. This happens all the time. So remember to ask yourself, what did I just read? If you practice and you ask yourself this question regularly as you read or as you listen, you will get better at retaining meaning and creating long-term memories of what you have read or heard. In reality, if reality were an ocean, the left brain could only take in one wave at a time. The right brain sees the vastness of the sea all at once. Now, both of these are kind of images of reality, image of reality, rather than reality itself. No matter how the ocean is taken in, the ocean does not change its nature, only its appearance changes. But because the right brain is sensing the entire picture, including the empty space, rather than just the objects in space one at a time, as the left brain does, reality is most closely represented in the right brain. The right brain senses the world in parallel, all at once, while the left brain senses the world in series, one thing at a time. Without space, no thing is possible, and without silence, no sound is possible. Noticing how the sounds of many things depend on the silence in the background. can be very helpful in exploring the concepts we have been covering when you listen to someone speak, or when you speak yourself. Bring some attention to the silent spaces in between the sounds. When you sense in the same way, a figure is dependent on the background. That sound is dependent on silence. Without silence, sound would have no meaning. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. Complaining is a popular and well-accepted form of social interaction. I don't mean being skeptical or offering constructive criticism. Those can be and are very helpful. By complaining, I mean objecting to things as they are in a way that isn't helpful, such as this cloudy weather is terrible. Let's define complaints as statements that advocate the idea that things shouldn't be the way they are, or that this shouldn't have happened. As you can probably guess, whether said out loud or just in your head, complaints always stem from the interpretive mind. A complaint is strictly an interpretation of events, a story, and a negative judgment. All of these unhelpful complaints stem from an over-identification with the left brain and the illusory self, for it is only the ego that can object to reality as it is. On the other side, gratitude is a reflection of the right brain. Being grateful goes beyond simple acceptance of reality into the realm of being thankful for it. For instance, if the right brain could speak, rather than say, I accept the fact that it is raining, it actually might say, I'm so glad it's raining. Research has determined there is a greater activity in the right brain when the subjects experience the sensation of gratitude. One way to play the game is to dismiss or forget the ideas presented here and continue to believe that the left brain is in fact you. You keep your identity and you keep playing a role in this theatrical world we call modern society. In this left brain world, you can win, but you sometimes will lose. There is the thrill of victory, but also the anxiety of defeat. Now, going to the other extreme, another option would be to wholeheartedly pursue activities associated with the right side of the brain in search of what many refer to as enlightenment. Ultimately, how to get there is largely a mystery, and certainly something that cannot be articulated fully in words, but there are many signs and pointers that the adepts have left behind. And a third option is what one might call a middle path, where you have one foot in each of the other two options. Now, in this option, you take the game just seriously enough that you do cheer when your kid wins a soccer game, and you feel sad when you don't get a promotion at work. Of course, in either case, you don't take either the victory or defeat too seriously, because behind them both, you maintain a hint of a smile. And this smile symbolizes your understanding that without losing, there can be no winning, and that every win ultimately depends on a loss. And there you have it. No self, no problem. Please do help out. It is easy. Simply like this video so more people can enjoy it. help with the algorithm. Like it, like it, like it. Share it too and spread the word. Someone out there needs to see this. Make it happen. Leave a comment. Share your thoughts. Start a conversation. Talk to each other. Talk to me. Let's talk. Subscribe to my channel and stay up to date. And the link to this book is in the description below, so buy it and read. And never stop learning, especially learning about yourself and nature. So gift yourself by taking the free human needs test on my website and find out what actually motivates you, what innate human need is driving all of your decisions and your behavior. And if you feel you are ready to improve your self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management even further, then do check out my Master of Life Awareness program. The links, they're in the description below. Thank you. Love and respect.